In today's video, we have the latest NHL trade rumors, including teams like the Montreal Canadiens and the Vegas Golden Knights, as well as a little bit on Pittsburgh as well. We have some UFA rumors and the latest on Toews Tatar. We have some possible players getting extensions like Ryan Lindgren with the Rangers. And what's the latest on players like Paul Stastny and Jonathan Toews? Will they be playing? Will they retire? We'll discuss what we know coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL rumors to take a look at today. Some are regarding UFAs, extensions, some players may be retiring, and some trades we may see down the road here as well. So let's get started with the latest we know around some UFAs. And the main UFA player we want to touch on today is former New Jersey Devil, Montreal Canadiens, as well as the Detroit Red Wing and a few other teams along the way here, Toews Tatar. Tatar is rumored to possibly be heading to Pittsburgh as the main team I've seen connected to him. I would not rule out Washington as well. That's just kind of a gut instinct I have based on what the team is looking for, because the Capitals are very much rumored to be looking for another player who can play a top six role. Tatar can still do that. I think he could be a second or third liner, maybe even a first liner in the right situation, I guess, depending on the team and how everything lines up and how structured they are. But Pittsburgh has been the main team that seems to be popping up that is getting interest for Tatar. Now, of course, that might be complicated. I think the Pens being interested in Tatar initially started when the Jake Gensel news broke about the fact that he was going to be out for 12 weeks and reevaluated with an ankle surgery. And now after Kyle Dubas has come out and spoke after he acquired Erik Karlsson, it's kind of poured cold water on that idea that Gensel will be going on LTIR. It doesn't seem like it's going to be possible. You have to be missing at least 10 games in like 28 days. And it doesn't sound like that's likely going to be the case. Dubas was saying with their schedule, the way things are structured in October once the season starts, he may only miss around 5 games. He said that, when it's due to medical stuff, it's hard to be precise and, doesn't want anybody to hold him to that 5-game number. But, even if it's a little bit more and it goes, 6, 7, 8, it's still not long enough to the point that he could go on LTIR, and without having him there, they wouldn't have the space without, moving out another contract. Now, what Tatar wants as a UFA, I don't know what he's going to end up accepting at this point. I'm going to suspect that's probably not going to be what he was originally hoping for going into the offseason. That's probably fair to say, but I don't know. I mean, that complicates things for Pittsburgh. So unless we see them move out some other money, I'm not sure. Now, I also seen Pittsburgh News and Pittsburgh Hockey Now today with Dan Konjinski suggesting that he feels that even though they acquired Erik Karlsson, that they might want to focus on continuing to upgrade the blue line before they do other moves. I mean, I think goaltending has been decided here. There's going to be Tristan Jarry, Alex Nedeljkovic. They have Hellberg as option 3. So they've got their 3 goalies. They traded to Smith, of course. They have a fairly deep forward group. I mean, they could certainly make some upgrades. I think Tatar could fit for sure. From a stylistic play and looking at how it could work, I think it would be good. Just from a money perspective, it would be very, very difficult. But the argument for maybe, looking to upgrade the D still would be that if you take a look, they added Erik Karlsson, they have him and Letang, both, tremendously gifted offensive right shot D. But what if one of those guys happens to get hurt, and they both have quite an injury history? So if either of them are injured and out for an extended time this year, suddenly you're looking at probably a guy like a Chad Ruedel or a P.O. Joseph who might have to be playing bigger top 4 minutes. And is that something that they feel comfortable with? So, obviously after moving, Petrie and Ruda, it does deplete the depth, although I think the Penguins were happy to do that to get their guy in Karlsson for starters. And secondly, I don't know that they were thrilled with the fit of either of those players anyway. But, when you take a look at what else is on the roster here, after Marcus Pettersson, then it kind of starts to get, just a little bit debatable here, on what the Penguins are going to have for depth purposes. Now, they could go, like your 5, 6, 7 guys are likely going to be Joseph, Ruedel, and probably Ty Smith. So I guess the argument would be that, if any of those guys have to move up into your top 4, then your depth is going to be challenged, and it might not be really where you need it to be if all three of those guys need to be in your lineup. It's not a bad argument. I don't entirely disagree with it. I'm just not sure exactly how they're going to go about doing that. There's really, as far as UFA goes, I'm not really sure there's really anything that jumps out as being a great fit for what's left, because there's not much out there. So they'd likely have to make a trade, which they could probably trade one of their depth forwards, to be honest. I don't think that's an impossibility. So we'll see what the Penguins do. But even Dubas had said he may be done for now and probably take this group into training camp. Could we see a move, through waivers or a small trade in camp? That's a possibility, and I think that's more than likely what we're going to see. Like I said, I'm not sure Tatar really can work there financially, barring another move, but we'll see. Now, Arthur Staple of The Athletic, who covers the New York Rangers, has mentioned recently that it looks like they're trying to come to a long-term extension with pending RFA defenseman Ryan Lindgren. Certainly, Lindgren has proven to be a pretty reliable, steady top four guy for them. Obviously plays a big role, good shutdown role, good defensively, doesn't do a lot offensively speaking, but blocks a ton of shots, has been a warrior for them, especially in the playoffs. And they'd like to get him locked up to a lower valued AAV on a long-term deal. So he's making $3 million now. He's scheduled to be an RFA next offseason, but they're trying to work away at this to avoid any potential arbitration dates next summer, because he will have arb rights. So they obviously don't want to go down that road. If they can get it done ahead of time, be even better. I'm sure Lindgren's likely going to be looking for a bit of a raise on that $3 million. If they can get him between 4 and 5 on a longer term deal, maybe not 4.5 range, especially, would be probably pretty durable and doable, and hopefully he can be durable long term, because obviously the way he plays, you're quite often in the run of a season, you're looking on, oh man, that had to hurt, and sometimes he leaves games, comes back. He's, like I said, he's just a warrior type defenseman who's proven to be a very big part of their group, so makes sense that they're trying to lock him up. Now, Kyle Dubas obviously spoke to the media after the Erik Karlsson trade, and we did talk about a few things that was touched on yesterday and earlier as well, like talking about Jake Gensel. We got some updates there, but the other thing that I thought was interesting, and just to look back, we had discussed it here before, back I want to say around the time of the trade deadline or leading into it, that there was some rumors and speculation that the Leafs were one of the teams looking to move Erik Karlsson, because the Erik Karlsson rumors basically have persisted for about a year. It was right around the time of like the end of last offseason, I think it was, or beginning of the season, when fairly new GM Mike Greer had made the comments that he was open to trading Erik Karlsson, and that it wasn't something that he was off the table. So when that became word, certainly perked a lot of ears around the league. It became a talking point, it became a story, and then within no time, eventually there was rumors circulating about what teams were calling, who was inquiring, and at one point there was a pretty aggressive rumor that the Leafs were very much in the mix. Like, it wasn't just that they were interested, but they were aggressively interested. And of course, it would have been very challenging to work out because, cap situation. And I'm sure that with the deal that he worked out with the Sharks now as a Pens GM, he probably would have needed them to take back much more money than they did doing this. But it just goes to show that Leafs Karlsson rumor did have some truth to it. And it's not just the current regime in Toronto that had interest. It was Dubas has been chasing him for an extended period of time, dating back to last season, leading into the deadline as he was Toronto's GM. So obviously the new regime there with Brad Treliving, they had reached out, and Karlsson did openly admit that he did have conversations with them as well. So that's not surprising, but Dubas has been after this player for a long time, so he finally gets his man. We got a couple of updates on a few veterans, at least speculation regarding them from NHL Insider from DailyFaceoff.com's Frank Saravalli regarding veteran Paul Stastny, who's 37 years old. He's heard that that there's a good chance that he may retire. Now, of course, that's not confirmed yet, and of course, every rumor could always turn out to be false. But generally speaking, when it comes to this type of stuff. Typically, it's pretty accurate, but I mean, you never know, right? I mean, we'll see. We also heard the same thing about David Krejci about a week ago. Nothing's made official here as of yet, but considering how deep into the offseason we are, and there's been absolutely no talk about Krejci returning, I think it's probably fair to say that was accurate and will be accurate here officially in the near future. But of course, Paul Stastny's had a pretty solid career. He's bounced around to a few teams, played in Colorado, St. Louis, Winnipeg, obviously ended up at Vegas briefly in Carolina, and at age 37 has a young family and might be calling her quits. So we'll see. I wouldn't be shocked if he did play. I wondered if he might follow his good friend Max Pacioretty to Washington. Those two have been very, very good, like best friends for many years. And I know they were enjoying the fact that they get a chance to play together on a couple of occasions, even though each was fairly brief. Once, in Vegas, and then of course, in Carolina as well. And I wondered if he might, be a player that the Capitals, brought on just as an insurance piece, especially if Backstrom is going to possibly continue to have hip problems and whatnot. But Cervelli says he's contemplating retirement, so we'll see if that comes up. And what's the future for former Blackhawks captain Jonathan Toews? Is he going to retire, or is he going to be playing? What's the deal there? Well, Cervelli's heard that at this point, it's looking like Jonathan Toews is not going to start the season for sure, 23-24, with a contract at a new team. And he may even sit out the entire year. The word is, and the belief around the league is that he's most likely going to sit out the season, or at the very least partially, if not fully, but not necessarily announce his retirement. I think he wants to wait and see kind of, does the passion and the, all the energy that goes into getting ready for a season, is that going to come back? How is he feeling health-wise? I just think he wants more time to kind of see where that's at before he makes any kind of official decisions. Sometimes I've heard of players in the summertime, think they're leaning towards retirement, and then as soon as they were supposed to be reporting to camp and they're not there, they miss it, and the kind of juices get flowing and decide they can't leave it yet and end up trying to go back. So we'll see what happens, but at this point it looks like Jonathan Toews at the very least won't be on an NHL roster to open the season, but could that change partway through? Or have we seen the last of them? It's kind of up in the air, and we probably won't know the official word on that for a bit of time. Now, on to some trade rumors around the league. This one caught me by surprise, but I thought since it was out there, I would discuss it here on the channel. But there was reports and comments in the Vegas Hockey Now website wondering if the Vegas Golden Knights could be looking to move between now and the trade deadline. Playoff MVP Jonathan Marchesseault. Now, the main reason for that is he's got 1 year left on his contract. He's a pending unrestricted free agent in his early 30s, but still playing great hockey. And we know that the Vegas Golden Knights are not afraid to make those tough decisions, and that to make those emotional ones that, when it comes to beloved, popular players, Marc-Andre Fleury, comes to mind. Like, they're not afraid to kind of just rip the Band-Aid off and do what they have to do business-wise. Now, at the same time, look at Fleury. He was still playing really well when they moved him, but it had nothing to do with that. It was a cap issue. They had an opportunity to get a guy like Robin Lehner at a cheaper price. They did it, right? So it's just that simple. Now, Marchesseault, he recently did an interview on TVA Sports, which is obviously French media out of Quebec. And the comment, I think, that kind of perked people's ears up that kind of started this was that he said that no contract extension talks have taken place yet. He said obviously sometimes management can be a little late getting to these things. And I guess some people might have just thought, well, geez, here we are well into August now, and they haven't even talked to him about an extension yet. Maybe they're not planning on keeping him long term. If you look at their cap situation, like a lot of teams, Vegas is right up against it. They have a tough cap situation. Now, even if they want to sign Marchesseault, which I'm sure they probably do, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be tough to do. I would suspect, though, that they are going to make a run at it. We know they're creative. We know that they're not afraid to make these decisions, as we're talking about, but it doesn't mean it's going to be him. We got to remember Alec Martinez making over $5 million. He's in the last year of his contract. I would suspect that he probably doesn't re-sign. they probably move on from Martinez after this year. I would imagine they probably keep him as their own rental, assuming they're likely going to be a playoff team to defend that cup championship. I wouldn't think otherwise at this point. So, Martinez likely plays the route, unless he extends short-term and very cheaply and kind of moves down the lineup a bit. But they certainly have Zach Whitecloud and Nicholas Hague are more than capable of playing bigger minutes. And it's time that I think that they kind of make room to elevate them in the lineup. So obviously, guys like Martinez and McNabb are kind of, going to be moving down probably while they move up. You still got Theodore and Pietrangelo playing the big minutes as the top guys, right? So that makes sense. So obviously that's some money there. We don't know what's going on with Robin Leonard yet. So really, if he ends up on LTIR, let's say he doesn't play anymore and can't finish his contract, well, they're going to have LTIR room for a little while here. So that kind of makes things, a little bit too. There's just some other questions in Vegas that we don't know. So at the end of the day, I don't think a Marchesseault trade is anything that's going to be, very likely, unless they just can't come to terms on a contract. He wants way too much money. There would be no shortage of suitors. He's done very well for himself in Vegas, and there would be a long line of teams interested, I am sure, but I don't think that's very likely to happen. More than likely, they figure out a way to move somebody else if they need to keep their playoff MVP intact. But we'll see. Obviously, not only did they move Fleury, Pat's already, they're not afraid to make these tough moves, but I don't know. I just don't think it's going to be Marchesseault, but we'll see. And of course, they did Riley Smith too after they won the Stanley Cup, an original misfit at that. I would think a guy like even a William Karlsson would be, probably preferred to be moved ahead of Marchesseault. But again, the contracts complicate things as well. Now in Montreal, we've talked about in the last couple of days since this Karlsson trade went down, the fact that Jeff Petrie likely isn't going to be staying in Montreal. He's probably going to be flipped with salary retained. According to some other Montreal media, the same is quite likely for veteran goaltender Casey DeSmith. Now we've talked about what the DeSmith acquisition meant for the goaltending situation in Montreal and whether or not is that going to push out Jake Allen? What's it mean for Samuel Montembeault, Caden Primo? And now it looks like DeSmith might not be staying around. And if that's the case, then that certainly less complicates things for sure for the other guys. But I guess depending on what they want to do, Casey DeSmith apparently has not been reached out to by the GM yet. The team on social media hasn't really welcomed Petrie DeSmith to the team. And based on how everything's reacted and the fact that Hughes hasn't spoken to the media yet, makes everybody think that he's not done and working on some subsequent moves here to flip these guys. So Casey DeSmith and Jeff Petrie both might be on the move. Things could change though. Once Ken Hughes gets into some of these conversations, maybe the returns aren't what they were hoping for, and they go a different route. I mean, at the same time, like I said before, they got 4 goaltenders now, and none of them are waivers exempt, so I don't know if they really want to go down that road. There was some talk that maybe you would push Jake out. Montembeault, I think, will likely be the one who stays longer term out of all 3 of them. Primo is still a question mark long term as well, but we'll see. If DeSmith gets flipped, then clearly the other guys are going to be sticking around for at least a bit longer. But where would DeSmith go? As we talked about yesterday in the video, there's a lot of goaltenders on the market that have not moved as of yet, many of which are more expensive, bigger names than DeSmith. So, obviously those guys are going to be harder to move, like Hellebuck, Gibson, etc. But, there's no obvious team that jumps out to me right now where he may be heading. Maybe he and Petrie go somewhere together. I'm not sure. But you would think if that was the intention all along for Hughes to move these guys, that they must have had some other conversations before, getting this deal done to make sure they could execute the next part. So we'll see. They might be just ironing out the final details. Time will tell, but word into it right now is that Casey DeSmith may not ever play a game in Montreal, and we'll see if that's true in the near future. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.